Hello everyone, it's me, Demetrius Villa from the High Speed Rail America Club. I'm here in Daytona at the Museum of Arts and Sciences for a very special comeback episode. Beside me are two vintage railway cars from a bygone era. One, the California Zephyr, and the other, the legendary Hiawatha. But the question we're going to answer here today, why did the US go from having such opulent services to having not so opulent services? We're going to answer that today. All aboard. Here we are inside the Root Family Museum, which holds a massive collection of Americana memorabilia, especially Coke bottles. That's because the Root Glass Company under Chapman J. Root and William Root actually designed the iconic Coca-Cola bottles we all know and love today. And they also just happen to be big fans of enormous teddy bears and racing automobiles, especially automobiles. But I'm not going to hang around all day and talk about that because, well, I'm not a guest on the Grand Tour. We're here to talk about the trains the family owned, which are now housed in the museum. The two train cars here represent a very different time in American history, a time where the train ruled and it made sure you could tell it was king, especially in bright orange, the Dell Rapids Milwaukee Hiawatha. This is the only one of the original 6 cars still remaining and in restored condition. One of the others was destroyed in a fire, 1 is missing, and 3 were sold to Mexico, which if they ended up like my Made in Mexico Ford Focus, they're leaking fluids and parts are falling more than a piñata. This particular car was restored, patched up, and reupholstered completely to its original status, taking 18 months to complete the process. The Dell Rapids ran on the legendary Milwaukee Road, blazing through the 400 miles of Chicago to Minneapolis in only 400 minutes, and that's including its stops. That's about 6.5 hours in 1948 time, compared to Amtrak today, aka America's Railroad, which does the route in 8 hours and 52 minutes. So not only was it faster, it was more stylish, sleeker, and well, classier. Then there's the Silver Holly, originally built by the Budd Company to be used on their Chesapeake and Ohio. It was sold to Western Pacific, Burlington, and Rio Grande for their California Zephyr service. Originally, it was a coach car, seating 24 people in the dome area and 36 downstairs. So the Silver Holly over here served on the California Zephyr and then became the private railroad car of the Root family, which is why they have it all spruced up here, similar to the Flagler train that we saw back when we were in West Palm Beach. But look at inside here. This is beautiful. This particular car was bought in 1970 by the Root family as their own private car and refitted with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen, and a parlor. Basically, it was a house on rails. Now, a lot of this luxury was quite common for trains that included sleepers. One would receive full dining service, picturesque views of America's scenic landscape, comfortable beds, and actual bathrooms that human beings could use, as opposed to whatever 4-foot, 5-inch, 15-waist future creatures that today's Amtrak intended for these bathrooms. Like, I can't even fit in them. The California Zephyr back in 1949 took 49 hours and 20 minutes to complete its journey from Chicago to San Francisco. Today, Amtrak does that in 51 hours and 20 minutes, forever befuddling historians and progress seekers alike that the passage of time doesn't always make things better. So the million-dollar question is, what the hell happened? There's some terrible misconception going around as to why train service began to fail in the United States. One of them being that America lacks the population numbers and density is absolutely false. These trains not only ran at a time where the US had about half the population it has today, but at a time the automobile was cheap enough for the average consumer and quite popular as well. Which brings us to the next misconception. The automobiles and the airlines naturally took away demand. Again, that's false. Airlines had a tough time competing with railroads because, well, they never made any money. Until the government stepped in and footed the cash. Of course, the government never foots its own cash. A lot of it came ironically from, well, railroad revenue. There was a massive campaign in the 1950s by several railroad companies, some including the New York Central Railway, Illinois Association of Railroads, and the American Association of Railroads because, honestly, nobody likes having their money forcibly taken away to be given to their competitor to the tune of billions of dollars. Just from 1921 to 1955 alone, the government financed more than $93 billion worth of pavement construction and maintenance of roads and highways. And that's in 1955 dollars. In our current year dollars, that's around $850 billion. Now, much of the revenue that railroads receive are through their freight service, which has still survived today and remains to be the most efficient form of transporting goods. But through the 1950s and 60s, it was getting harder and harder for railroads to maintain their once profitable passenger lines that were clinging on to dear life. In 1967, the U.S. Postal Service pulled all of its first-class mail contracts from passenger rail lines to move them onto trucks and airplanes, signaling the final nail of the coffin and ending an era.
How would you like to run a business if the government used your tax dollars to build one alongside you, then made it tax-free and turned it over to a competitor, and helped him operate and maintain it? That is a problem of the railroads. Now, despite outdated policies which restrict us, discriminate against us, and would have put any other industry out of business, the railroads have made progress.
We're extremely interested in getting this torn down, but doesn't it make it just a little sad? No, honestly, I'm not very sad. It takes a lot. What it is, you've been a county commissioner 5 years. It takes a lot to make you really see. But just by the way, that LDC is going to cooperate with us, so that we just thought about streets downtown section across the railroad. And I think that'll be a greater blessing than tearing down the...
As a private business, the railroads welded a continent into a nation, helped little shops become large factories, small towns become cities, linked every community with every other community. The welfare of other businesses and the welfare of the nation's people have and always will depend heavily upon the railroads continuing to operate as a private business, continuing to advance, continuing with these advances and as private businesses to help keep the nation prosperous in times of peace, strong in times of emergency. Under a free and enterprising system of business operation, the railroads can serve you best at this moment and as they work on through every moment of every day and night.
So think about it. The US government has spent an enormous amount of money, much of it coming from railroad companies, to build competitors. It still spends billions of dollars a year to upkeep roads. In 2007, we spent over $146 billion for the upkeep and construction of roads, according to the Congressional Budget Office. A lot of this data isn't even readily accessible or public either. It took WikiLeaks to find out that the government subsidized airlines with $155 billion from 1918 to 1998, with claims that there are subsidies that are going also to foreign airlines such as Emirates, Qatar, and Etihad. And it's not just our tax money alone. Roads alone cost $124 billion a year in traffic congestion, a staggering reported $871 billion a year in crashes, and over 40,000 deaths per year. Why? Well, I'll just drop this red pill over here if you're ready to come down the rabbit hole. Back in 1939, General Motors unveiled its Futurama exhibit, a supposedly utopian vision of society ruled by the automobile, massive roads, and outstretched suburbs, and even automated highway systems. So less like the cartoon series and more like the dystopia we're living in today. Between 1938 and 1950, GM and other companies began to take over and buy out rail transit companies in the US to replace them with buses, in which there were mixed convictions on whether or not it was a conspiracy to monopolize transit, but the results remain the same. And of course, when you're General Motors and you're down on your luck, you can always borrow money from your best buds in the federal government to the tune of $50 billion. $11 billion of it we the taxpayers lost in aggregate.
One of the first decisions that I made as president was to save the U.S. auto industry from collapse.
Meanwhile, Amtrak doesn't even get peanuts. No, seriously, they're taking away dining service on many long-haul trains. The decline of U.S. passenger service, of course, has been exclusive to the United States and Canada. Elsewhere in the world, it's been a very different story. Take Europe, for example, which has a myriad of different companies, both private and state-owned, operating trains that exceed 200 miles an hour. Many of our members in the High Speed Rail America Club have praised how advanced and modern these trains in Europe are, with comfortable seating, modern ticketing systems, and of course, full course meals. And then there's Japan, which takes everything to perfection and one step forward when possible. Apart from the regular bullet train services, which has first-class reclining seats and even foot spas, a new luxury cruise train known as the Shimishika has full rooms, lounges, dining room, and even a fireplace. If it hasn't been apparent enough in this channel, everybody else is ahead and we're far behind when it comes to infrastructure reform. But it can, and it is being fixed. There is a growing market for rail travel in America, and that market is about to boom with the new Brightline service coming in South Florida, which will finally bring America's first modern express train. Amtrak service in the Northeast still serves more customers than airliners between Washington, D.C. and Boston. Texas is working closely with Central Japan Railways to bring the 205-mile-an-hour bullet train service between Dallas and Houston. And California is currently constructing their own bullet train system. Will this new era finally be the triumphant beginning of passenger rail service's true return to the US? Hopefully, the glory of what America was able to accomplish as once the leader in infrastructure with its rail system being the face of it is about to set itself on track again. We hope you all enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the High Speed Rail America Club to get on board the Railvolution. Join our Facebook group to connect with our other members from around the world, and pledge to our Patreon to contribute to future episodes and support our advocacy and research. Until next time.
Milwaukee Road, traveling across the countryside. My oh my, what a wonderful ride when you hear that diner call. An invitation to you all. Wheels are clicking on the track, they'll take you there, bring you safely back on the old Milwaukee Road. On the old Milwaukee Road, all aboard.